Okay, we are live. All right, good morning, everyone. Apologies for the delayed start. We had some late arrivals due to weather and a couple of other absences. So we were waiting for a quorum, but now we have such. So we're going to get things rolling on Thursday, January 22nd. And we're going to pick up work with testimony on page 645, an act relating to identity verification in real property transactions. We did an introduction and a walkthrough last week with counsel and Representative Pisnall. And after that, hearing a story or two about real life situations, we decided to pick up conversations with some industry folks and trade association folks. Rep McGuire is not available this morning, so we are going to just go straight down the punch list, and we are going to begin with Peter Tucker on Zoom. Mr. Tucker, how are you?
Good morning. Nice to see, a part of your committee anyhow. So
slightly more than half of us. Yes. 53.7.
Great.
Yes.
Well, thanks for the invite. For the record, Peter Tucker, I am the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy for the Vermont Association of Realtors. And we appreciate the opportunity to comment on H645. The Vermont Association of Realtors represent some 2,000 members across the state who work on behalf of buyers and sellers every day. We adhere to a code of ethics and promote home ownership and private property rights. H645 addresses an important issue in our industry, fraudulent misrepresentation as the owner of a property. This is an issue nationwide and occasionally in Vermont. Realtors across the country are well aware of this strategy, and our National Association of Realtors provides guidance and best practices for our members. In Vermont, the Vermont Association of Realtors has actively communicated with our members and the public with fraud alerts and encourage members' best practices that include asking for a Zoom or a FaceTime meeting with a prospective seller. Very often, fraudulent sellers do not want their face to be seen. Ask them to show identification on the screen during their initial meeting. Use an app like Forewarn to research potentially fraudulent sellers. You can conduct a reverse lookup of the telephone number if it shows anything other than the owner of the property. Really gives us a good sense of what's going on. Conduct a reverse name search and call the number of the folks who by reverse name actually own the property. And in addition, verify information with town clerks as we do on a regular basis. More importantly, trust your instincts. For our members, there's a ton of experience out there, and and they can tell when something isn't on the up and up. And we report activity to the Vermont Attorney General. So, and I've included this in my comments for the committee. But Forewarn is a member benefit provided by the Vermont Association of Realtors for all of our members, and this is kind of what the bill is getting at, I believe. It provides identity, phone numbers, address history, financial indicators, property records, properties that they own in other places, criminal records, anything that's a public record. And this is a tool that we provide to our members so that they can do this kind of forensic research, right? Before entering into a listing agreement with someone to be certain that they are who they say they are. Realtors are doing a good job of this. I've provided copy from a Manchester Journal article that was done actually a while back now in 23. Jennifer Hoffman, who's the broker owner of Hoffman Real Estate, was contacted by a fraudulent seller to sell a piece of land down in Bennington. The scammer even provided her with a falsified passport. She tracked down the real owner of the property, determined they didn't want to sell the property, and reported that attempt to the Attorney General's office. In that same article, the Bennington town clerk, Cassandra Barbo, said the more professionals involved, the better chance to catch red flags before it's too late. The public is best served when buyers and sellers are represented by a realtor. Last year, Representative Pritchard approached me to discuss a land scam that was thwarted in Paulet. The scammer contacted a local real estate company asking to list a piece of land for sale. The realtor, who knew the family, contacted an uncle, I believe, who confirmed that the actual owner had no intention to sell the land. But the scammer, undeterred, approached another real estate company, once again providing a fraudulent passport as identity. That company recognized the scam, confirmed it with the town clerk, and reported it to the attorney general. In doing research for this, I actually found an article, December 2nd of 25 in the Hardwick Gazette of all places, that indicates a recent report compiling national data about the growing national epidemic of real estate fraud, ranked Vermont 51st out of 50 states and the District of Columbia with a falling rate of scams involving real estate. Now, these are all scams, not just land scams, but they are, we are not as big a target maybe as other areas of the country. Realtors work collaboratively with title companies, attorneys, mortgage brokers every day to ensure multiple layers of review prior to closing on a property. We work with the Attorney General's office to report suspected fraudulent activity and provide scam alerts to our members and the public. Realtors are already licensed by the Secretary of State through the Office of Professional Regulation. We are already subject to complaints of unprofessional conduct. Realtors currently have the tools to protect the public from this kind of fraudulent misrepresentation in land scams. And as a result, our position on H645 is that this registration is not necessary. Realtors are doing the job and protecting the public. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. Happy to answer any questions.
Apologies if you cited this earlier in your testimony. I was still kind of getting, but my question right now is, you cited a couple of instances where fraudulent activity was flagged, reported, and stopped. But do you have any idea, say maybe in like the last calendar year, how many instances were flagged and prevented? Through your organizations?
I really don't. Yeah, good question. Perhaps I can determine some of that information.
If you could try and mine some of that, that'd be interesting to see, because one of the things we are trying to assess right now is how persistent this is, and if we're seeing a notable spike in it. It's like kind of like one of the frauds du jour. They always hook onto something if it's working, and then they move on to something else once it gets stopgapped.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chair. So I will say that the article in the Hardwick Gazette was December 2nd of 25. So that's very current information showing that scams are actually being reduced in Vermont. And these are all scams. And this is one thing, when I was thinking about testimony on this particular land scam issue, the big money is in spoofing an email with a different bank account on it. And the bigger ones that hit are when, from our perspective, from the realtor's perspective, a buyer is sending a deposit to us. But there are instances when, they're very close to closing and buyers are sending essentially all of the proceeds to purchase a house. Usually at that point to the attorney or to a bank. And that's a big chunk of money. So, when you look at kind of scams overall, there are just a variety, as you say. And the minute we kind of nip one, that's going to morph into something else. We do see these folks approaching multiple real estate companies. And that's why we've been so concerned. And I will say that there was a successful scam, a year and a half ago, that really triggered a lot of this work by the Vermont Association of Realtors. We got, when it was successful, it's obviously very shocking. You know, and we just wanted to make sure that our members were aware of it and really, you know, give them some best practices to work with to ferret it out.
Rep. Waters Evans has a hand up.
Good morning. You mentioned that you actively communicate with realtors, the members of your association. I'm wondering if there's any training or continuing education effort or seminar or anything like that that you offer that might just out of curiosity. I was wondering what
Sure.
I'm not sure what actively communicate means.
Yeah. So, and one thing I'd like to comment on is, you know, I would encourage the committee to hear from the title insurance industry and also attorneys, because this bill, you know, addresses, you know, the attorney work. You know, we do actually in the summer we have an event, and it's been loosely titled the Battle of the Barristers. But it basically takes on, you know, hot topics. And we spent a ton of time on this last summer at our summer event, discussing exactly this thing, and you know, having attorneys give us their impression, because we know, I mean, we're the front line on this particular issue. You know, the attorneys are certainly in line with us, you know, in terms of, you know, going to a closing. You know, but the reality is, and this was pointed out by the town clerk in Paulet, you know, if it hits my desk, it's too late. You know, once the money's been transmitted, the fraudster is off to the races on his next one. So, you know, it is really important, you know, that we're the ones that can and are identifying this.
Thank you.
Anything else from Mr. Tucker? Peter, if you could like maybe sniff around on, you know, instances over the last year, that would be helpful information with us as we start assessing the tools and the frequency that people have at their disposal.
Right. And, you know, what I'd really like to do is come back to you and say, here are the ones that, you know, we caught, you know, because I think that is the, you know, I have not heard of any experiences in the last year or so. I think that, you know, there was one that happened and it really triggered a response from the Vermont Association of Realtors. And we work with Liz Smith, especially at Caddick. You know, she's super experienced at this kind of stuff. You know, they're putting out scam alerts all the time. We actually, they now send us their alert so we can push it out to our members.
Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, definitely the like number of catches that you've made.
I'll see what I can do.
Would be useful.
Great.
Rep. Coffin.
Just a question, because I know to be a realtor, you have to be a member of the Vermont Real Estate's, the VAR, correct?
Well, so to be a realtor, you need to be a member of our association. To be a licensed real estate agent or broker does not require membership in the Realtor Association. You know, I think if we're 2,000 members, there's probably 2,500 licensees, somewhere in that range, statewide. So, you know, what we find typically are those folks that are not realtor members are retirees who are just kind of maintaining a license, and a lot of commercial brokers have a tendency to not do that either.
Okay, so they wouldn't have access, would those people still have access to the same app you have that, trying to get the name of it right here.
Right, yeah, Forewarn, yeah.
Forewarn, would they still have access to that?
No, they would not. Yeah, that is a member benefit. That's why you belong to the Realtor Association.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got to say, I mean, the people that are licensed that are not members of the Realtor Association, because that also provides form programs and access to multiple listing service, are typically not very active folks or commercial. Yeah.
Okay, but they could be targeted specifically by not being a member.
Yep.
Correct?
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
They should join our organization.
Well, trade association plug. Yeah.
Yeah, well, only when I get the chance.
Hey, when it's there, swing away. Anything else from the table for Peter? No. All right, thank you, sir,
All right.
and
Thanks to the
enjoy
committee.
your conference.
Right,
All
yeah,
right.
I'm gonna learn how to be a better advocate, so I will come home fully prepared.
All right.
Thanks, I'm
Wonderful.
gonna hang on and watch. Yeah.
Oh, please do, please do.
Yep.
Hang out. How are you, sir?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, how are you?
Doing fine for whatever today is, Thursday.
Not sure I like the screen behind me.
It's really hard. I was on a meeting last night and I was on the screen and people were complaining they couldn't see
Yeah.
me. It was discombobulating them.
Yeah.
I was at them.
I
Yeah.
just, with my Italian background, I never let anybody sit behind me. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. For the record, Chris Delia, President of the Vermont Bankers Association. Before I get into the detail of my testimony, just a couple of responses to your questions. One, your observation, Mr. Chairman, is absolutely correct as far as fraud is concerned. As soon as the parties in the marketplace figure out how to prevent a particular scheme from happening, the criminals are on to the next iteration. And we find that happening in all different areas, certainly in our world when it impacts our customers. So you're absolutely correct there. I will share with you that it's not just the transactional fraud in the sense of the real estate transaction or land transaction, but I'll give you a situation of an impact on my son-in-law's family who was selling a lot. And there was a piece of malware that got into one of the lawyer's computers. And the malware just kind of sits there and it's tracking and observing what's going on. And one of the parties in the transaction got an email from the lawyer. It was not the lawyer, it was criminal activity. And it intercepted or gave information to intercept the $55,000 wire transfer that took place in order to close on the deal. And that money was gone. And that's because of the malware and criminal activity using that approach, in a real estate transaction. Representative, you asked about training. Training is ongoing, and just to share with you in our world, so we have a standing mortgage committee, we have a standing training committee. We have 2 large mortgage conferences a year, and then we have 2 service providers that will deliver training to your desktop. So anytime there's a new issue that comes up, a new regulation, a new scheme, there's training that's developed and it's constantly ongoing for our world. So just to answer your question regarding training. When we looked at this issue, I was made aware of it late last fall. I had conversations with some of the practitioners in the marketplace, had a conversation with the representative over Zoom to understand what she had seen in her area. And I will say that while there has been some activity in the marketplace, and I think some of that activity has been thwarted, it's not been the entities have not succeeded in their efforts. It's not necessarily a bad idea to try and get ahead of the curve if we can, because we often see problems that are happening in other parts of the country that kind of slowly make their way to Vermont. So not a bad idea to try and get ahead of the curve. But when I look at this bill, and I'll start with section 1 of the bill, I'll hone in on something that some of you said, and I think Peter said. The approach that's contemplated in section 1 with the registry is very much after the fact. It's at the time you're going to be filing paperwork with the clerk's office. You want to stop this early on in the process. And that's the time that you've got that fraudulent individual who's coming to the realtor to say, hey, I've got this land and I want to sell it. Trying to stop it at the time you're recording the documents is too late because the money's probably gone at that point. And Peter just did a great job of providing some information and education about what they do to understand who their customers are. So the notion of creating a new registry in Secretary of State's office, who was here, and I know will speak on this, is from our standpoint is not something that we would support. As Peter alluded to, we as mortgage lenders are registered with a national mortgage licensing system, realtors licensed by OPR, lawyers that are licensed by the courts. There are already plenty of locations where you've got registries and information that's governing how these different actors participate in the marketplace. Having another registry just doesn't make sense. A registry that I think I read the bill correctly, would also include owners of property and buyers of property. I don't see how you're ever going to be successful in getting a grantor to register with the Secretary of State's office. What I'm also concerned with in section 1 is you're creating a new approach to land records in Vermont and the recording of land records in Vermont. If there's one thing that I've learned from my meetings, either with the Secretary of State's office or two individuals that are on the screen behind me from the clerk's world, is that not all clerks are created equal. Not all clerks operate equally. And to create a new body of regulations or process that they would have to follow, in some communities will work well, and in many other communities will not work well. And that's not a criticism of the clerks. They just do not have at times the capacity or the support to do what is expected of them. And there is a lot in statute that we expect of them. The other thing that concerns me is this notion that if you fail to provide information about being in the registry, there's this pause that occurs for 15 days in the recording of the documents that the clerk will receive. I can tell you that in my world, that will absolutely be unsatisfactory. That will not work. The reason it won't work is the way we perfect our lien on a piece of property when it involves a loan is the time that it gets to the clerk's office. And ideally that clerk records it in the day book. And then at some point records it in the land records and indexes it. If you have a 15-day period that loan can be sitting out there, I can assure you that will have a chilling effect for a number of lenders in the marketplace who are already concerned about the differences in practices that occur around the state with the recording of documentation. We know that, again, in some communities, as soon as the clerks get the documents, they're in the day book, and at some point shortly after that, they're recorded. We also know some instances where documents have been sitting on a desk for a period of time, where documents are in a box for a period of time. And that's troubling for us because that's our hook, if you will, into the collateral that's been used for the loan. If it's not recorded properly, then somebody potentially could sneak in front of that mortgage, and it won't take many of those to really have a negative impact on the lending market. So what's contemplated in section 1, while I think it's an interesting approach, is not one that we can support. The other sections of the bill, 2, 3, 4, are interesting, but I think they warrant more discussion. And what I find interesting about them is in our community, a lot of our work is focused on knowing our customer. Because of 9/11 and the Bank Secrecy Act that came out after 9/11, there are procedures that every bank must follow to vet every person who comes in our door that wants to do business with our institution. We have a whole body of regulations that requires us to collect information, to vet that information, to ensure that you in fact are who you say you are. And we work with third parties to help us do that. That's an interesting concept. And in my opinion, again, understanding what realtors and lawyers are already doing today, of knowing who your customer is. Because if that realtor has to go through the process that Peter talked about, then I could see where a number of these bad actors are getting caught early on. if a lawyer is doing something similar. So the sooner you're going through that in the process, in my mind, it starts to eliminate some of the concerns that are out there. So while I can sit here and agree with those provisions that are in the bill, I think it would be very important to understand what they're doing already and to identify if there are truly any gaps that should be filled in order to prevent this from continuing. So having the Secretary of State's office today is wonderful. They can share with you what their work is. Having a realtor come in and a lawyer come in, the title community come in, I think can start to help build that broader picture of the work that's going on already in the marketplace. Education is key. Absolutely agree with that. And the more we can educate the practitioners in the marketplace, the sooner we have the tools to identify the fraudulent activity that's going on and stopping it. But I just don't think 645 is the approach to take at this point.
Hey, I don't think I have any direct questions for you, Chris. Does anyone at the table have anything for the Bankers Association right now? Okay.
Always available if you.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was a lot of very useful detail to understand what exists within the system of your association. So, great. No, thanks for the time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna shift over, or I should say up to our friends on Zoom. Carol, first time this session.
Good morning, all. Lovely to see you again.
Yes.
For the record, Carol Dawes, former clerk treasurer for 16 years. I'm now the treasurer of the city of Barre, and I'm chair of the legislative committee for the Vermont Municipal Clerk and Treasurers Association. So you may be seeing more of me over the rest of the session.
All right.
Thank you so much for inviting us to come share our thoughts on this bill. I do want to, because I know you're squeezing a bunch of people into a short period of time. Essentially, I want to say ditto to what both Peter and Chris said. I was particularly struck by Peter's remark that once it hits the clerk's desk, it's too late. Both Peter and Chris talked about the tools that they have, that the realtors have, the attorneys have, the title insurance people have. The clerks don't have that tool, and once the documents are received by us, we don't have the deal is done. My biggest concern, or our biggest concern at that point in time, is the liability being placed on the clerks to perform some kind of verification. All the other people that we've talked about, the realtors, the lawyers, the bankers, that they all have liability insurance. They have various protections for the work that they do. Clerks don't. And it would be a real concern about clerks having to bear that liability. The other thing that was talked about is the timing. Chris talked about the pause, the 15-day pause. One of the things that clerks are taught from the day they're elected or appointed is the timeliness of recording documents. I agree with Chris's comment that there are outliers, but the vast majority of clerks understand by statute our responsibilities to record a document within a certain number of days. We understand the minute a document is received by us, it is date and time stamped, and that date and time stamp become the date and time associated with when that document goes live, if you will. Chris talked about somebody sneaking in a lien in advance of recording a document. And if we can't live and die by that date and time stamp, if we have to create these 15-day gaps, not only does it create a hole for that particular document, We can't record anything received after that document until we can clear that particular document from our queue. Everything lives and dies by its date and time stamp. So we do have real concerns about what is currently in this draft bill. We also understand that if there's a part we can play in helping prevent this kind of fraud, we'd love to be able to be part of the solution. It's just this particular bill doesn't seem to put us in the right place. So happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you. That was clear and concise. I appreciate that. Anything from the table for Carol? Okay. Thank you, Carol, if you don't mind hanging out in case something pops up. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Shuffling along then. Continuing on Zoom. Bobby Brimblecombe? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Brimblecombe, Bobby
All right.
Bobby Brimblecombe. I'm the town clerk of Marshfield, have been for 28 years, and the prior three speakers have made all the points that I was hoping to make. I don't have anything new to add. Just to reiterate, by the time it gets to the clerk's desk, the money's changed hands. It's too late. The horse has left the barn and the fraud has already happened. I also had the concerns about holding the documents for 15 days because that, as Carol has explained, that throws off all of our recording process. And we have questions about, would that document take precedence over a document that came the next day that was confirmed? I don't think it's a good idea to have a clerk's office holding documents in limbo, unsure of where they fit in the recording process. And legitimate transactions where the verification hadn't been done, even legitimate transactions would get held up, could get muddied up by that. So I don't think holding the recording is the answer. I don't have anything else to add, but I'm happy to answer questions.
No, thank you. Thank you. I mean, if you are just echoing the sentiments of the previous speakers, I guess I don't have any further questions for you at the moment, but that's just me. Anybody at the table? Seeing no hands. Thank you, Bobby. All right, we are gonna shift over to back in the room to Tanya Marshall. Or would you like to go together as a duet? That's wonderful. I love a good Secretary of State's office duet. Singing involved.
too.
I know, right? It's becoming a pattern.
Just efficient.
It really is.
You give you one of those.
Good morning. For the record, Lauren Hibbert, Deputy Secretary of State, and I have with me.
I'm Tanya Marshall. I'm the Director of the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration and also Chief Records Officer in State Archives.
Thank you so much for having us on this bill. I'm just going to speak first about the professional regulation aspects of that overlay all of these transactions. I think you've heard quite a bit about it, but obviously we regulate the real estate brokers and salespeople, also the real estate firms. We do have the Real Estate Commission, which is a commission that is appointed by the governor. They meet monthly, or pretty much monthly. I think they meet about 10 times a year. We also receive complaints of professional misconduct in this profession. We have not received complaints related to fraud, to my knowledge. I will have to review that again, but I don't believe we have. And we don't have a very active case discipline history against real estate brokers at this time. We also regulate notaries, and notaries play a big piece in real estate transactions, particularly because they verify the true identity of the people signing the documents. Of course, fraudulent documents can be presented to them. It's not completely infallible, but there are quite strict guidelines around the acts of notaries, whether it's being done in person or remotely. To my knowledge, we do not have any complaints about notary publics who accepted fraudulent documents. So I think those are two layers of professional regulation that overlay this. And then I just want to speak on behalf of the Secretary of State's office on the creation of a registry. We do not support a creation of a registry within our office. If the legislature were to move forward on that, we would really need to engage with the legislature on the cost of implementation. There's no cost here, stand-up cost. We would absolutely be asking for stand-up cost. Because while it may seem simple to create a registry, it's not that simple. It requires a whole new type of application. It would be on our business services platform. It would need to be searchable. There would need to be a lot of fields that were displayed. That is not as inexpensive as creating an Excel spreadsheet. It requires coding, development, time, et cetera. And also in line with that, if we were to have a registry, we would need the fee to be higher than $20. That fees generally need to support the structure and maintenance of the program. I would assert that $20 at this time really doesn't cover the work of implementing, maintaining, and sustaining a registry. Because in order for it to be functional, it would have to be really easy to see, really easy to access, and have all the correct information within it. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tanya Marshall so that she can talk about the real property modernization project that she's spearheading.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I haven't been here yet this session, but I'm not often in House Job Ops. I put inside the testimony first for everyone who talked before. We agree in working with them. We're all in the same boat together on real property records and data. I'm not sure how much the committee's aware of the modernization project. So it was an initiative of the legislature in 2022. We are the last state in the country to actually do electronic real property records and reporting. Electronic reporting, digital reporting. We're the last state to pass that. It's an overlay law that was passed in 2022 to allow the modernization effort to occur. So we've been working with the municipal clerks. We've been working with all the different entities related to real property. We've also been working with the Department of Tax because it overlays with listers and assessors. And we look at real appraisal. We are still in a paper-based land record reporting system. They're the last entity in the country. So many of the things that are in the bill are actually part of a submission portal that would be for electronic reporting. It'll be identified who the submitters are. It can be a full transaction directly from the parties who are in the banks, the others that are not the outliers to fraud. It's already built into those types of modernization systems for fraud alerts for property owners. Parties allow property owners to understand what's happening with their property and that it's filed against that. This is an active and ongoing project. There's proof of concept pilot system right now for a statewide option for municipal clerks to opt into. And it's a proof of concept so that we're not tied to all the different laws that are still paper-based, really optimizing what can be and could be even better than other electronic reporting and land records management systems across the entire country. A lot of these are cobbled together over time. So what we added into testimony here, which you've heard, is that there's a lot of things on preventative. Now, there are some things that the legislature could consider about corrective, which is after the fraud had occurred. We don't have a lot of that within this law and our current laws right now, but we also have a lot of antiquated real property related laws. So we are planning on a larger legislature for the 2027, 2028, which feels so far away. But yeah, we're in 2026 because there are so many little pockets. This is one of the oldest functions of government. It actually predates statehood for the municipal clerks. And the first act that was passed was for preventing fraudulent deeds. And here we are.
Thank you. Historical nugget.
Legislative history background to anything. The whole point of it was and back then, think about it, people coming in and walking into the office. I'm here with Lauren. I have decided to give her my property. We are doing that in front of a clerk who's writing it into a book, right? And then notaries came along, so you didn't have to physically be there to do the identity, but we are still paper-based land records.
Mm.
Book page, we have an opportunity to do something that other states don't. And we do have this, we're a cohort, right? We're ecosystem. So my recommendation is allow the modernization. There may be things, and we've been spending a lot within fraud. It's not just deed fraud or impersonation or wire transfer. There's all aspects of this. And, states are reacting in different ways, but the key part is really is a combination of people, right? The training, the processes, what's preventative. It's a combination of what can be done in process to give property owners the ability to have fraud alerts, things that they can see and access from an own portal, what is on their property. That's a really key part. And the secondary is that once that fraud happens and it's known, it may be years. My first, entry into this was 2012 with a homeowner out of Milton calling me who went to sell their property and had found a fraudulent sale.
Mm.
It had already been sold for, I don't know the circumstances how, but that was years after. And there are different ways that, corrective, what do you do after that happens? But I think it'd be better as part of that larger modernization bill than piecemeal here. But if we do hear about fraud and working with the different associations, we should really trace down every single aspect of where it happened because it's all different things that you've already heard today. So the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration is leading that. It started with just standards and uniformity for clerks, but then when the municipalities listening to listers and assessors not having all the same information, listening to the zoning and planning not having it, now Department of Taxes, now it's the bigger picture for fraud. It's really an opportunity to just kind of step back and do it well, rather than to rush into something that would create another barrier or cumbersome process.
All right. Well, I'm glad the balls are rolling on that project, right? Like that's it's a central warehouse for that is last state, huh?
It's also the opportunity, if your last state, you're not cobbling stuff together like other states have, right? Like
No, for sure.
reporting started in 1999 based on so they were automating paper processes in Washington, right? And then it became, so all the other counties, and also think about a county government system, which is what, except for Vermont, Rhode Island, and Connecticut have, they do their own, like everything's within that county. And it doesn't have a lot of state overlap for permitting or zoning or land use like we do. So it gives us an opportunity to really be a true state. We're one state, a lot of different needs around real property, a lot of different interests, housing, everything, getting that together so that we can really do better for Vermonters all around.
That was very useful. Rep. Pisnell.
So as the presenter of the bill, I knew that there were a lot of things as a former town clerk that I didn't agree with in the bill, but that didn't fight the bill. But and recording it at the time of is not feasible. I mean, I understand that all the sales already taken place. However, I do think that there should be some process, and we're charging $20 is not, I mean, we don't charge anything, but to have a authenticated piece of paper notarized at the realtor or at the time of the loan, someplace prior to selling, when the person wants to put that piece of property on sale, that's verified that they are the current owner and not a fraudulent representation of them being the buyer or the seller. So that was the intent. And then it formed into a lot of things as a town clerk that I don't really agree with, but I had to go along with anyways. So, and I don't see that, I mean, I think what we're doing with your with the act of getting that all done is great, but it's still 2 years out. And we're seeing a lot of people, and unfortunately, our town clerks know our people.
Yeah.
So we've stopped a lot. Town clerks have stopped a lot of those sales because they know the owners. And they'll contact, say, gee, you're selling your property, and then it can prevent them from happening. But the intent was to get some sort of a document recorded prior, maybe at the time of listing, that was recorded in the town clerk's office that says, yes, I am the true owner of this property and am selling that. So that's what the original intent was, and it's morphed into.
So if I could just respond to what I hear the intent was from your perspective, and I appreciate, I think what you would be seeking would be an additional requirement for realtors at the point of sale, at the point of engagement with a landowner. And I don't want to speak for the association, and Peter absolutely can do that. But if you wanted to do that, you would want to put it in Title 26, which is the chapter related to professional regulation. That's where real estate salespeople and brokers are, as a requirement for a real estate transaction. And we would just need to think about that on a couple of levels. There are a lot of requirements for real estate transactions. Peter knows them far better than I do. And real estate folks are good about doing a lot of public education about lead, about all sorts of things. So that would be a place where the concept that you were talking about could be introduced. My concern, just hearing it and responding, on the fly, is how does someone verify the identity? And how would that be done? And that's the tricky part that I think the Office of Professional Regulation would really need to dive into. And also we would want to work with the association on that. But maybe Peter could have an opportunity to respond to that as well. I don't know, but that's off the cuff. It would go into Title 26, and then we would have to look at the structure of that requirement and the feasibility of that requirement.
Peter, did you catch that? Did you want to chime in?
Hi, sure. Once again, Peter Tucker for the Vermont Association of Realtors. We do have a lot of regulation, and we work with the Secretary and the Office of Professional Regulation. We're actually entering into rulemaking right now, and it is kind of an ideal opportunity to consider things like this. I will say my testimony is we're doing it. It's not mandatory, but I've got to be honest with you. If there is, I cannot imagine any real estate licensee in the state of Vermont who wants to enter into a fraudulent land deal. We're giving them plenty of knowledge about, how to detect that. And really, we are subject to, regulations. So, if I hate to say it, but if something does happen, that realtor is, subject to unprofessional conduct complaint. And, I think that the threat of that, weighs heavily on us every day. Actually having something specific, it could be up in that rulemaking discussion. But the reality is we're doing everything we can to avoid this. As Chris D'Elia alluded to, as soon as we kind of get this one squashed down, there'll be a new scam coming down the pike. And, we just have to be super aware of how we deal with that.
Yeah, no, we're hitting the same button again with that, the ever evolving practice, right? It's whack-a-mole, for lack of a better way of putting it. Yes.
And I was going to add, in terms of industry standards and trying to address fraud, it is to not have like spontaneous changes to how we do reporting or how we do real estate, but rather, do the preventative actions, use all the tools already there. They are there, and just use them better. Rather than changing legislation or adding something that makes it a more cumbersome process in addition. Right? So that is kind of a key. There's a great thing with all the national associations too, representing this, not wanting to do something because the next fraudulent thing will happen.
Any other questions for, I guess, Peter or Secretary of State's office? Yeah, this is all very useful. We really appreciate everybody's time. And that was a lot of information and perspective to digest. So thank you. I'd like to pause for 5 minutes before we shift into our next subject matter. So, Nick, could you take us off for a moment?